My name is Lena Carter. I was 21 when my mother emptied my college fund on a rainy Thursday morning in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I remember the sound first. Her bracelet hitting the kitchen counter while she signed the withdrawal papers, sharp, metallic. Final. My younger brother Dylan stood beside her smiling like he had already won something. I said nothing. I just stared at the bank envelope in her hand and noticed one detail that did not belong there. My father's signature looked wrong, too slow, too careful. What they did not know was that Dad had once shown me how he signed legal documents when he thought someone might forge them. So I folded the receipt calmly, put it inside my backpack. Then I walked out before anyone saw my hands shaking. 3 years later, Dylan was standing outside First National Bank begging me not to go inside. And what my mother discovered that morning destroyed everything she thought was safe. Some families protect their favorites. Others protect their secrets. The rain started around 8:10 that morning. Not heavy rain, just enough to make the sidewalks shine black outside First National Bank on Harvard Avenue. I remember because I kept watching water slide down the windows while my mother signed papers that should never have existed. The bank smelled like burnt coffee and wet coats. Dylan sat beside her wearing Dad's old leather jacket. He kept bouncing his knee under the desk like this was exciting somehow. Like we were about to celebrate something. My mother looked calm. Too calm. Your father wanted both of you helped, she said softly. But Dylan needs this now. Needs, that word stayed with me. The banker turned the monitor toward her. I caught the number before he clicked away. 84,317, every birthday check from Grandpa. Every summer Dad worked overtime at the refinery. Every dollar sitting untouched since I was 11 years old. Gone. I looked at Mom. You said the fund was separate. It was, she answered quickly. Was, another word that stayed with me. Dylan finally looked at me. Lena, don't do this here. I almost laughed at that. Do what here? Breathe? The banker shifted uncomfortably. His nameplate said Marks Freed, mid-40s, gray tie. Wedding ring scratched badly on one side. He already knew this conversation was wrong. I just need clarification, I said calmly. Mom's jaw tightened. That happened whenever she felt control slipping. The account transferred legally this morning, Marcus explained carefully. Mrs. Carter provided the required authorization. Authorization, not ownership. Small words mattered during ugly moments. I stared at the paperwork sitting near Mom's purse. One page had Dad's signature near the bottom, except something about it felt strange. Dad always signed fast, confident. The J in Michael curved sharply upward. This signature looked slow, careful, like someone trying not to make mistakes. Mom noticed me staring. Your father signed those before he passed. 3 months earlier, Dad had died from pancreatic cancer at St. Francis Hospital, 52 years old, gone in 6 weeks. Nothing about that summer felt real yet. Sometimes I still expected him to walk through doors. I nodded slowly. Can I see it? No, Mom answered immediately. Too fast. Dylan leaned forward. Lena, seriously what? I kept my voice level. You told me last month the account couldn't be touched without both children present. That was before we reviewed everything. Reviewed. Another careful word. Outside, tires hissed through rainwater. Somewhere near the lobby entrance, a child started crying. Nobody at our desk moved. Marcus cleared his throat. If there's a family dispute we can schedule. There's no dispute, Mom interrupted. Then she smiled at me. That smile hurt worse than yelling. The calm one, the public smile. The one she used in church after screaming at home. You already have your apartment job, she said gently. Dylan needs a chance to get started. Dylan stared at the floor. He did that whenever guilt appeared. Not enough guilt to stop anything. Just enough to avoid eye contact. I looked at his jacket again. Dad bought him that jacket 2 birthdays ago, after Dylan totaled his truck drunk outside Broken Arrow. Mom spent 2 weeks defending him to relatives afterward. Boys make mistakes. That was her favorite sentence. I folded my hands together tightly beneath the desk. So my college fund is gone. It's family money, Mom corrected quietly. Family. Interesting word considering only one child benefited. Marcus pushed a receipt toward her. She signed again. Bracelet against marble. Click. That sound still lives in my head. Then Dylan finally spoke. I'll pay it back. Nobody believed him, not even Dylan. Mom slipped the paperwork into a large white envelope from the bank. For 1 second, the top page slid partially free. I saw Dad's signature again, and beside it, something tiny near the bottom corner. A second date, not the same date as the withdrawal authorization. My stomach tightened immediately. Dad had taught me something years ago while helping me open my first checking account. Always check dates first, he said. People forget dates when they lie. I stood slowly. I should go. Mom looked relieved. That hurt too. Lena, it's okay, and strangely it was. Not because I accepted anything, because something suddenly felt off enough to become dangerous. I picked up my backpack from the chair. That was when Marcus said something he probably should not have said. Miss Carter? I turned. He hesitated, then glanced quickly toward my mother before speaking. If you have questions about estate documentation, you may request independent review through probate. Mom froze completely, only for half a second. But I saw it. Fear, real fear. Dylan saw it too. Mom, she grabbed the envelope quickly. We're done here. Marcus looked down at his keyboard immediately. The conversation ended there, but not really. I walked outside into cold rain without opening my umbrella. Cars crawled past the intersection. Across the street, a woman struggled carrying grocery bags into a blue Honda Civic. Ordinary life continued. Mine didn't. I sat inside my car for almost 20 minutes staring at the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive home and forget everything. Dad was dead. Maybe Mom really needed money. Maybe Dylan would fix his life. Maybe this was ugly but legal. Families survive ugly things. I even started the engine once, then stopped, because of the signature. Because Dad signed quickly, always quickly, and because my mother had answered no too fast when I asked to see the papers. People hide things in speed, not words. My phone buzzed suddenly. Dylan, I let it ring twice before answering. Yeah? His voice sounded low, nervous. Mom's upset. I almost smiled. Interesting choice. Not Lena's upset. Mom's upset. I didn't yell, I said. She thinks you're going to make problems. The rain grew heavier against the windshield. What kind of problems? Silence. Too long. Then Dylan exhaled quietly. Just let it go. There it was. Not an explanation, not an apology. A request. Requests are dangerous when nobody explains why they matter. I'm at work, he added quickly. I gotta go. He was about to say something else. I heard the breath. Then another voice in the background asked him a question, and the call disconnected immediately. I sat there holding the phone. What I did not know yet was that Dad had left something behind 3 floors above our old garage apartment, hidden inside a locked desk drawer nobody had opened since the funeral. And by Friday, everything had changed. 3 days went by. I replayed the bank conversation every night, not the money part, the fear. Mom's face when Marcus mentioned probate. That reaction stayed with me longer than the missing $84,300. On Sunday afternoon, she invited me to dinner like nothing had happened. That was normal for our family. Disasters became invisible fast. Their house sat near South Yale Avenue in a neighborhood Dad could barely afford even before the hospital bills. Red brick, white shutters. The porch swing Mom never used. I parked beside Dylan's Camaro at 5:42 p.m. New rims, new tires, interesting timing. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary, chicken, and lemon cleaner. Mom cleaned aggressively whenever she felt anxious. Every surface shined too brightly. Dylan sat at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. He smiled when he saw me. Actual warmth. That made things worse somehow. Hey, Bean. He still used my childhood nickname. I hated that he could still sound like my brother sometimes. Hey. Mom carried plates to the table carefully. Dinner's ready. Nobody mentioned the bank. Not during prayer. Not while eating. Not while Dylan talked about a business opportunity with 2 friends in Oklahoma City. Mom nodded proudly through the whole thing. Dad used to call Dylan's plans lottery ticket thinking. Big dreams, no math. I watched Mom refill Dylan's drink before he asked. Small habits expose families. When I was 15, I got pneumonia during finals week. Mom forgot to pick up my antibiotics for 2 days because Dylan needed help finding a tux for prom. That memory returned suddenly while she laughed at one of his stories. The human brain stores strange things. You're quiet, Mom said finally. I swallowed slowly. Tired. She studied me for a second too long. Mothers know when silence contains teeth. Then Dylan's phone buzzed. His entire mood shifted instantly. He stood and walked toward the hallway before answering. Too quickly, too private. Mom noticed me noticing. He's under pressure right now. From what? I almost asked. Instead, I cut another piece of chicken. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the neighborhood. Nobody spoke for almost 30 seconds. Then Mom lowered her voice. Your father worried too much about money. I looked up carefully. What does that mean? He made everything complicated before he died. There it was again. Complicated. Another vague word hiding specifics. I kept my expression neutral. Complicated how? She folded her napkin precisely. You know how he was near the end. Suspicious. Emotional. No. Dad was dying near the end. Different thing. He trusted you, I said quietly. A flicker crossed her face. Guilt maybe. Or irritation. Of course he did. But she looked away when answering. Dylan returned then, paler now. He shoved his phone into his pocket too fast. Everything okay? Mom asked immediately. Yeah, obvious lies. Even Mom knew it, but nobody pushed further. That was another Carter family rule. Never examine problems closely. Dinner ended around 7:05. I helped Mom clean dishes while Dylan disappeared outside for another phone call. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows again. You shouldn't punish your brother forever, Mom said suddenly. I rinsed a plate slowly. Forever's been 3 days. He's trying. At what? That slipped out before I could stop it. Mom placed a glass down harder than necessary. At building a future, I turned off the water. With my money, silence, long enough to become honest. Then Mom sighed heavily like she was the victim somehow. Your father always favored you intellectually. Dylan felt that. I stared at her. This was new territory. Dad loved us differently, maybe. But favored? No, Dad simply expected Dylan to grow up eventually. That's not true. It is, she replied quietly. You just didn't notice. Interesting tactic. Rewriting memory calmly enough that you question your own version. Mom specialized in that. When I was 12, Dylan stole $80 from Dad's wallet. Mom somehow turned the entire situation into a lecture about why I should not create division between siblings. By the end, Dylan got comforted. I apologized. Gaslighting works best slowly. A loud crash sounded outside. Both of us looked toward the backyard instantly. Dylan stood near the patio, dropping something beside his car. His hands were shaking. I did not ask why. Not then. Mom walked to the back door quickly. You okay? Fine, Dylan snapped. Too sharp. Too defensive. He bent down and grabbed a black duffel bag from the wet concrete. Heavy bag, very heavy. Something metallic clanked softly inside. Mom's eyes darted toward me immediately. That tiny movement mattered. What's in the bags? I asked. Tools, Dylan answered fast. For what job? He did not say. Instead, he carried the bag upstairs toward his old bedroom. I listened carefully. Closet door opening, then silence. Mom returned slowly. Don't start. I asked one question. You always push. Interesting word for noticing things. I dried my hands carefully. Then something caught my eye near the kitchen desk. Dad's old key rack, still hanging beside the pantry. Most hooks empty now, except one. A small brass key with faded blue tape wrapped around the top. My stomach tightened instantly. Dad's office key. I had not seen it since before the funeral. Mom noticed my expression. That opens junk, she said too casually. Dad kept a small above the detached garage, tiny room, one desk, filing cabinet, old baseball radio near the window. He spent hours there after his diagnosis. Sometimes all night. You cleaned the office already? I asked. Yes. Another lie. I knew because dust still covered the garage windows outside. Nothing about that room had been touched. The air inside the kitchen changed suddenly. Pressure, like both of us understood something without saying it directly. Then Mom reached for the key. Too late. I had already seen it. You should head home, she said softly. Dismissal disguised as concern, classic Mom. I grabbed my jacket from the chair. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I had already made my decision. As I walked toward the front door, Dylan came downstairs again. No duffel bag now. He looked exhausted suddenly, older somehow. Lena, I stopped. For 1 second, he looked genuinely scared. Not manipulative, not defensive, scared. I know this looks bad, not is bad. Another careful choice. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. Just don't go digging through Dad's stuff. There it was, the first real warning. Before I could answer, Mom appeared behind him instantly. Too fast again. Protective, controlling, like she already knew what he almost revealed. I left without another word. The night air smelled wet and cold. Porch lights reflected across puddles near the driveway. Inside my car, I sat staring at the garage behind the house. Second floor office window. Dark, silent lock. The answer had been in that room the entire time. I just had not opened it yet. And what waited inside that desk drawer would change the meaning of everything my mother had done. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. I came home from work on a Thursday evening and found a yellow notice taped to my apartment door. Final warning stamped across the top in red ink. My rent was 4 days late. I stood there staring at the paper while traffic moved below my building on East 11th Street. Somebody nearby was grilling onions. A dog barked twice behind the laundromat. Ordinary sounds, humiliating moment. I checked my bank balance again anyway. $212.43. That was everything. My student loans were already deferred once after Dad died. I worked 32 hours a week at a dental office while taking night classes online because finishing school physically became impossible after the fun disappeared. Meanwhile, Dylan suddenly had new rims. Funny how money moves. I went inside my apartment and sat on the floor instead of the couch. I stayed there almost an hour, watching sunlight disappear across the carpet. Part of me still wanted silence. That is the ugly truth nobody admits. Sometimes betrayal feels smaller if you leave it untouched. Families survive on denial. But Dad's office key stayed in my jacket pocket the entire time like it weighed something. Around 8:40 p.m. I drove across town. The Carter house looked dark except for the kitchen light. Mom's car was gone. Dylan's too. Good. Rainwater still glistened on the driveway from earlier storms. I crossed the backyard quietly toward the detached garage. Dad built the upstairs office himself when I was 14. He called it the only quiet room left in America. The wooden stairs creaked exactly the same as always. Third step louder than the others. Memory lives in sounds some. At the top landing, I stopped. The office door stood slightly open. That was wrong. I knew it immediately. Mom always kept doors fully shut or fully open. Never cracked. I pushed it slowly. Dust floated through weak lamplight near the desk. The room smelled like old paper and cedarwood. Dad's coffee mug still sat beside the radio exactly where he left it, untouched. So Mom lied again. Nobody had cleaned this room. I stepped inside carefully. The filing cabinet remained locked, desk drawers closed, bookshelves neat. But the desk chair sat angled slightly away from the desk. Someone else had been here recently. My pulse quickened. I moved toward the desk slowly, almost embarrassed by my own nervousness. Then I noticed scratches near the bottom drawer lock. Fresh scratches, metal against metal. Someone had tried forcing it open. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. Wrong size, interesting. Dad never locked that drawer separately before his diagnosis. I crouched lower. Tiny wood splinters covered the carpet beneath the desk. Recent damage. Whoever searched this room did not find what they wanted, or maybe they ran out of time. I should have left then, honestly. Normal people would leave. Instead, I opened the top desk drawer, pens, receipts, old batteries. Second drawer held tax folders. Third contained envelopes labeled insurance and medical. Then I reached the bottom drawer, locked. I stared at it quietly. Dad once told me something while teaching me how to drive. People hide truth in boring places because nobody looks twice. At the time, he meant speed traps. Now I wondered if he meant something else too. I looked around the office again carefully. Desk, bookshelf, lamp, baseball radio. Then my eyes stopped on the framed photo near the window, me and Dad fishing at Grand Lake when I was 16. The frame sat crooked. I walked over slowly. Behind it rested a tiny silver key taped against the wall. My chest tightened instantly. Dad hid it there intentionally, not random, intentional. I returned to the desk and unlocked the bottom drawer carefully. Inside sat only 3 things: one yellow legal envelope, one cassette recorder, one folded piece of paper with my name written across the front in Dad's handwriting. Lena, that was all. No jewelry, no cash, just paper and a recorder. I sat down slowly in Dad's chair. My hands shook opening the note. Lena, if you are reading this, something already went wrong. That sentence alone almost broke me. I stopped breathing for a second. Outside, wind pushed softly against the garage windows. I kept reading. Do not confront your mother immediately. Do not trust verbal explanations. There are copies of everything. Copies, everything. My eyes moved faster now. The college account was never intended for Dylan. You need to verify signatures and dates before making decisions. Cold spread through my stomach. Dad knew, or suspected. At the bottom, he wrote one final line. Marcus Reed knows where the duplicate file is stored. Marcus, the banker. Suddenly, every conversation inside the bank sounded different in my head. I grabbed the yellow envelope next. Inside were photocopies, account statements, withdrawal records, probate drafts, and one document that made my entire body go still. A transfer authorization dated 11 days after Dad entered hospice care. Impossible. Dad was unconscious by then. I knew because I stayed overnight at St. Francis that entire weekend while Mom took Dylan home. The signature sat at the bottom anyway. Fake. Not maybe fake. Fake. I stared at it for almost a full minute. Then something else caught my attention. Second witness signature. Dylan Carter. I leaned back slowly in the chair. For 3 days I thought Mom acted alone. Now that story cracked open. The room suddenly felt smaller, hotter. I looked toward the cassette recorder next. Old Sony model, dusty but functional. A small sticky note attached to the top read, "Only if necessary." My father's handwriting again. I picked it up carefully. Then footsteps sounded downstairs. I froze instantly. Garage door opening. Voices. Mom and Dylan. I killed the desk lamp immediately. Darkness swallowed the office. My heartbeat hammered so loudly I thought they would hear it through the floorboards. They were moved, Dylan whispered downstairs. I told you nobody comes up here, Mom snapped quietly. Fear. Real fear now. Not grief, not stress, fear. I backed silently toward the office wall, holding the envelope against my chest. Below me, footsteps crossed concrete, then stopped. What if she saw something? Dylan asked. Mom answered too quickly. She doesn't know enough yet. Yet, the most dangerous word so far. I covered my mouth tightly as stairs creaked below. Third stair, loudest one, coming closer. And what I still did not understand was why my dying father believed copies of these papers might someday protect me from my own family. The office door handle moved once, slowly. I stood frozen beside Dad's bookshelf, holding the envelope so tightly the paper bent in my hands. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far across Tulsa. The handle stopped moving. Then Mom's voice came through the door. Locked. Silence followed. I realized something then. In panic, I had locked the office behind me without noticing. That tiny mistake saved me. Dylan exhaled shakily outside. Maybe she already took it. She wouldn't know what to look for. Mom sounded calm again. Too calm. That meant she was scared. I learned that years ago. The calmer she sounded, the worse things actually were. Metal scraped softly near the doorknob. A key. My supply pulse exploded. She has the garage key, Dylan whispered. She shouldn't. Another lie. Mom knew exactly where the key had been hanging. I looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. But the office barely fit a desk and 2 chairs, no closet, no safe corner. Then footsteps stopped again. No, Mom said suddenly. What? If she came here, she already saw enough. Neither moved. Rain tapped harder against the windows now. I could hear Dylan breathing through the door. Fast, uneven. Finally, Mom spoke again. Go downstairs. What if now? A long pause. Then footsteps retreated slowly down the stairs. Only one set remained outside the office. Mine inside, Mom's outside. Separated by cheap wood and 20 years of lies. I waited without moving. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2. Then her voice came quietly through the door. Your father made mistakes near the end. I closed my eyes, not grief, damage control. He was sick, she continued softly. Confused. Interesting how dead people become unreliable whenever documents appear. I said nothing. He scared himself with paranoid ideas. Still calm. Still careful. Still never directly denying anything. Then came the sentence that changed everything. You don't understand what Dylan owes. Owes. Not owed. That word mattered immediately. Before I could think further, headlights flashed through the office window from outside the garage. Another car pulling in. Mom stepped away from the door instantly. Downstairs, someone slammed a car door hard enough to shake the garage slightly. Male voice. Angry. "Where is he?" Dylan answered downstairs. "Nervous now." "Lower your voice." I've lowered my voice for 2 weeks. Heavy footsteps crossed concrete below me. Then another voice joined. "Second man, you said Friday, Vegas." I knew that accent immediately from Dad's old casino trips years ago. My stomach dropped. Mom spoke sharply. "Not here. Too late. I already understood enough. Debt. Gambling debt." That black duffel bag suddenly made sense. The new rim sats too. I moved silently toward the office window and looked down through the blinds. 2 men stood inside the garage beside Dylan. Both mid-30s maybe. Leather jackets. One tattooed neck. Neither looked patient. Mom stood near the stairs, gripping the railing tightly. "How much?" the taller man asked. Dylan looked pale. 35. 35,000, Mom snapped. The man laughed once. 35 left. Left, meaning there had been more before, a lot more. Mom actually stumbled backward slightly. "What did you do?" Dylan rubbed both hands across his face. "I almost fixed it. Almost. The favorite word of failures." "You said business investment," Mom whispered. "It was." "No," the tattooed man interrupted. "It was blackjack." Silence swallowed the garage. I leaned against the office wall slowly. There it was, the missing money. Or part of it. For 1 second, I almost felt relief. Simple explanation. Dylan stole the money, lost it gambling, Mom covered for him. Awful story, but understandable. Human weakness, human stupidity. Then the taller man spoke again. "Your brother promised another transfer Friday." Brother, not mother. Brother. Important detail. Mom heard it too. Her entire expression changed. Dylan noticed instantly. "Mom, another transfer from where?" No answer. That answer terrified him more than the debt collectors. "Interesting. You told me the account was empty," she whispered. Dylan looked toward the stairs, toward my office, toward secrets. Then one of the men pulled out his phone. "We done talking? Because my boss ain't waiting forever." Mom straightened immediately. Protective mode again. "How much ends this?" 35 plus interest. "How much total?" 42. $42,000. My father worked 14-hour refinery shifts for years to save that college fund. Gone in months. I should have hated Dylan completely then. Instead, I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike when I was 7. Running beside me until he fell into someone's mailbox, trying not to let go too early. That is the problem with family. Good memories survive longer than they deserve. Mom reached for her purse shakily. "I can handle this." "No," Dylan said fast. "Too fast." Again. "You can't. Why not?" What remained hidden? The taller man checked his watch. "You got until Friday." Then all 3 men left the garage together. Car doors slammed, engines faded. Silence returned slowly. Downstairs, Mom turned on Dylan immediately. "How much else did you take?" "I didn't." Weak lie. She knew it too. I saw the transfers, plural. My pulse quickened again. Not one theft, several. Dylan sat heavily on an old workbench. I thought I could replace it before she noticed. She, not they. Me, he meant me specifically. Mom lowered herself into Dad's old folding chair like her legs stopped working. "When?" "Last year. Before Dad died, cold spread through my chest. Before Dad got sick enough to stop him." Mom whispered something next I almost missed completely. "Does she's the second account?" Second account. Everything inside me went still. Not the whole story then. Not even close. Dylan looked upstairs again, toward me. "I don't think so. Think, not know." Mom pressed both hands against her forehead. For the first time in my life, she looked trapped. Actually trapped. Then Dylan quietly asked the question that changed the direction of everything. "What if Dad told her?" Neither spoke after that. Not for several seconds. Then Mom stood abruptly. She wouldn't stay quiet if she knew. Wrong. I already had. That was the terrifying part. I backed away from the office door, carefully holding the envelope and recorder against my chest. For 3 days, I thought I finally understood what happened. I was wrong about one thing, the most important thing. Because somewhere beyond the gambling debt and forged signatures, another account still existed. And both of them were terrified I might discover it first. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until 4:13 a.m. with Dad's envelope spread beside a cold cup of coffee, trying to make the story fit together. It almost worked. Almost. Dylan stole from the fund before Dad died. Mom discovered it later. She covered everything to protect him. Simple. Except simple stories do not require forged signatures. And they definitely do not create second accounts nobody mentions aloud. By sunrise, my head hurt. At 8:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen for nearly a minute before answering. Hello. Her voice sounded exhausted, smaller somehow. Can we talk? Interesting, not demand, not accuse. Talk about what? Silence. Then quietly. Your father left more debt than you realize. There it was. The explanation she wanted me to accept. Debt. I drove to the house around 10. The sky hung gray and low over Tulsa, heavy with more rain. Mom sat alone at the kitchen table wearing Dad's old cardigan. That almost broke me immediately. Because for 1 second she looked less like a manipulator and more like a widow. Human moments complicate hatred. A thick folder recessed beside Tuffy cup. She slid it toward me carefully. Read page 7. Insurance paperwork. Hospital balances. Late mortgage notices. Numbers everywhere. I turned slowly to page 7. My stomach tightened instantly. Life insurance denial. Claim rejected due to undisclosed treatment history. Denied amount, 410,000. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Dad's policy had collapsed before payout. Mom watched me quietly. The hospital bills destroyed us, she whispered. For the first time since the bank, her voice sounded honest. Raw honest. We were drowning. I looked through more papers. Second mortgage documents. Credit card debt. Collection notices. Dates lined up perfectly with Dad's illness. Suddenly everything felt different. Not forgivable, but understandable again. Mom rubbed tired eyes. I thought I could fix things before you found out. Interesting phrasing. Not before it happened. Before I found out. How much did Dylan take? I asked. She closed her eyes briefly. About 48,000. 48. Almost half the fund. My chest tightened. And the rest? We moved it. Where? Into another account temporarily. Temporary. Another vague bridge word. I stared at her across the table. Part of me wanted desperately to believe this version. Family under pressure. Sick husband. Financial collapse. One reckless son. One mother making terrible decisions trying to save everyone. That story made emotional sense, which is exactly why it felt dangerous. What about Dad's signature? Mom looked down immediately. He signed earlier paperwork before hospice. Not a full answer, not technically a lie either. Careful again. Always careful. Then tears appeared suddenly in her eyes. Real tears. I watched your father die 6 inches at a time. That sentence hit hard. Hard enough to make me hate myself for investigating. She reached across the table slowly. I know you think I chose Dylan over you. Did not think, did. But he was falling apart, gambling, drinking, owing people money. Your father kept trying to rescue him. I believed that part instantly. Dad always believed Dylan would become better tomorrow. He said family protects family, Mom whispered. Then she finally cried. Quietly, not dramatic. Just exhausted, crying into both hands at the kitchen table where we ate birthdays and Christmas dinners for 20 years. And I almost stopped there, honestly. I almost handed the folder back and let the whole thing die. Because grief makes ugly choices sometimes. Because people survive disasters badly. Because I still remembered Mom sleeping upright beside Dad's hospital bed while machines beeped through the night. Villains rarely look like villains every hour of the day. Then my eyes caught something strange near the bottom of the insurance denial letter. A handwritten note, tiny, blue ink, transfer remaining funds as before review. No signature attached, no explanation. Just that sentence. My stomach tightened immediately. Who wrote this? Mom wiped her eyes quickly and looked over. For half a second she froze. Tiny reaction. Huge meaning. I don't know. Lie. Absolute lie. Because her tears stopped too fast afterward. I pointed again. Why move funds before review? It's probably bank language. No. Dad worked in finance before the refinery. I grew up hearing him explain paperwork at dinner tables. That was not bank language. That was instruction language. Someone warning someone. I leaned back slowly. Outside, wind rattled branches against the kitchen windows. What review? Mom stared silently. Then her phone rang. She grabbed it too quickly, looked at the screen. Fear again. I need to take this. She walked into the hallway immediately. I listened carefully. Low voices, sharp whispering. Then one sentence floated back into the kitchen. No, she hasn't seen the originals. Originals. Plural. Cold spread across my arms. I stood slowly from the table and looked through the folder again while she whispered down the hallway. Most documents were copies. Photocopies. Except one. A folded deposit slip near the back. Different paper texture. Real document. Balance remaining $36N, $141. Dated 4 months before Dad died. Second account. My pulse quickened instantly. I flipped it over. Nothing. Then I noticed faint pressure marks pressed into the paper beneath the deposit slip. Indented writing from another page once resting on top. I tilted the paper toward kitchen light. One line became visible. Safe deposit box. First National, Marcus. Marcus again. Not coincidence anymore. Mom's footsteps approached suddenly. I slid the deposit slip back into place instantly. She entered the kitchen looking pale. Everything okay? I asked calmly. No, first honest answer all morning. She grabbed the folder quickly and closed it. Too late. I already saw enough. Then she looked directly at me for a long moment, not angry, not defensive, scared. You need to stop digging before somebody gets hurt. Somebody, not something. That changed everything again. Because financial secrets do not usually sound like threats. And what I still did not understand was why a bank manager, a safe deposit box, and my dying father all connected to money my mother claimed was already gone. 3 more days passed. I said nothing to anyone, not Mom, not Dylan, not even my best friend Tasha, who kept asking why I looked like I had not slept in weeks. Because once secrets become real, speaking them aloud changes them. And I still was not ready for that. Friday morning, I called Marcus Reed from my car outside the dental office. He answered on the 4th ring. This is Marcus. It's Lena Carter. Silence immediately. Not confusion. Recognition. You shouldn't call the bank line, he said quietly. Interesting. Not, how can I help? Not, what's this regarding? Fear again. Then where should I call? Another pause. Finally, he gave me an address, a coffee shop near Riverside Drive. Noon. Then he hung up. The entire morning crawled. At 11:52, I parked across from the cafe and watched the entrance through my windshield. Marcus arrived exactly at noon, carrying no briefcase, no bank folders, nothing official. He sat in the far corner booth facing the door. Smarter, I slid into the seat opposite him. Up close, he looked exhausted. Gray beneath the eyes, wedding ring gone now too. Did my mother send you? I asked. First? No. Did Dylan? No. Then he leaned forward carefully. Your father knew something was wrong 6 months before he died. Straight to the point. No warm-up. Good. I kept my voice calm. The signatures? Marcus nodded once. He requested independent verification after noticing transfers he didn't authorize. My pulse jumped. Transfers again. Plural again. How many? Marcus hesitated. 5. 5 separate transfers. I stared at him. That money started disappearing before Dad got sick. Yes, everything tilted sideways inside my head. Dad knew before cancer, before hospice, before hospitals. This had been happening much longer. Marcus lowered his voice further. He believed your brother had access to account information through your mother. Believed, not proved. Yet, why didn't he stop it? He tried. Marcus glanced toward the front windows nervously. But he didn't want criminal charges. Of course he didn't. Dad protected people too long. That was his weakness. Marcus slid a folded paper across the table. 1 minute, he said quietly. Then give it back. Handwriting analysis report, official, independent. 2 signatures highlighted side by side. Dad's real signature, fake signature. Even I could see the difference now. The curves hesitated in the forged version. Tiny pauses. Fear inside pen strokes. My stomach turned. Who forged it? Marcus looked directly at me. That report never named a person. Not answer. Careful again, but you know. Silence. Then, your father suspected someone. Suspected. Still not naming them. I handed the paper back slowly. Why help him hide this? Marcus rubbed both hands together. Because he asked me to. Simple answer. Honest answer maybe. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed a small brass key. Safe deposit key. Dad's key. You were supposed to receive this after probate closed. Supposed to. Not did. Why didn't I? Marcus looked ashamed suddenly. Your mother said you were emotionally unstable after the funeral. I almost laughed. Efficient lie. Easy to weaponize grief against women specifically. She instructed the bank to delay contact until legal review ended. Was that legal? No. Interesting. Marcus slid the key across the table. I did not touch it immediately. Why now? His expression changed slightly. Fear again. Because your brother came to the bank Wednesday. Cold spread through me. What did he want? The box, of course. He claimed you authorized him. I stared at Marcus carefully. And he panicked when I refused. That tracked perfectly. I finally picked up the key. Small thing, heavy thing. What's inside? Marcus exhaled slowly. I don't know. Lie. Not full lie, maybe. But partial. He knew enough to fear it. Then his phone buzzed across the table. He looked at the screen and all color drained from his face. Who is it? I asked. He stood immediately. You need to be careful now. There it was again. Not legal warning. Personal warning. Marcus. He looked down at me. Did my father change his will? Silence. Long silence. Then finally, yes. Every sound inside the cafe disappeared for 1 second. What changed? I can't discuss probate details. But you know. Yes. My throat tightened. What did he leave me? Marcus shook his head slowly. You need to open the box first. Then he left. Just stood and walked out without coffee, without goodbye, without looking back. Outside, rain had started again. Of course it had. I sat alone holding the brass key while strangers talked around me about normal lives. Lunch plans, weekend trips, football. Meanwhile, my dead father apparently changed his will in secret before dying. And my brother tried accessing a safe deposit box badly enough to scare a bank manager. I should have gone directly to the bank. Instead, I drove to the cemetery first. I do not fully know why. Maybe I needed Dad to feel real again before opening whatever he left behind. His grave sat beneath a maple tree near the south fence line, fresh flowers already wilted from rain. I stood there quietly for several minutes, angry, sad, confused. Then suddenly another car door slammed nearby. I turned. Dylan. He froze, seeing me beside the grave. Interesting. Coincidence. Or not coincidence at all. He walked closer slowly, wearing a dark hoodie soaked from rain. For the first time in weeks, he looked genuinely destroyed. Not defensive. Destroyed. I've been calling you. I know. You need to stop. There it was again. Stop. Not wrong. Not misunderstanding. Stop. Why? His jaw tightened. Because you don't understand what Dad found. Found. My heartbeat quickened instantly. Not suspected. Found. What did he find, Dylan? He looked toward Dad's grave instead of me. Then quietly. He wasn't supposed to change the will. Wasn't supposed to. Those 4 words cracked everything open. Before I could respond, Dylan's phone rang loudly in his pocket. He checked the screen and went pale immediately. What? I asked. He ignored me. Answered fast. Yeah? Silence. Then his face changed completely. Fear. Raw fear. No, don't do that, he whispered. I stepped closer. Dylan. He turned away sharply. I said, don't touch her. Her me. The call disconnected. Rain poured harder around us. Dylan shoved the phone back into his pocket with shaking hands. Then he looked directly at me for the first time all day, and I realized something terrifying. He was no longer scared of losing money. He was scared of someone else entirely. Nothing happened for 2 days, then Sunday arrived. At 6:14 that morning, somebody pounded on my apartment door hard enough to wake the neighbors. I grabbed the lamp beside my bed before opening it. Dylan stood outside, soaked in rainwater, breathing hard like he had run upstairs. His lip was split. Fresh blood. What happened? Can I come in? I should have said no. Instead, I stepped aside. Family again. Always family. He entered my apartment and locked the door immediately behind him. His hands shook so badly he dropped his phone twice trying to place it on the counter. I stared at him carefully. Who hit you? No one. Lie. Weak lie. He looked terrified, not drunk. Not manipulative. Terrified. Then he noticed Dad's yellow envelopes sitting partly visible near my kitchen table. All color drained from his face. You opened the office. Not question. Statement. Yes. He sat heavily on the couch and covered both eyes with his hands. For almost a full minute, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, Dad knew. Knew what? I waited. Outside, thunder rolled softly over Tulsa again. Finally, Dylan looked up. When Dad got diagnosed, Mom thought he was changing the will because of the medical debt. Interesting beginning. Not because of me, not because of favoritism. Debt again. But that's not why, he continued quietly. What was the reason? His eyes filled instantly. I stole from the accounts. There it was. Finally direct. Much at first, 10,000. My chest tightened. At first? He nodded weakly. I thought I could replace it before anyone noticed. Same sentence addicts always use. Hope disguised as plan. I had gambling debt already. How already? Sports betting, online poker, Vegas trips. He swallowed hard. It got worse after Dad got sick. I leaned against the kitchen counter silently. He kept talking. Mom found out after one of the banks called the house. Then she helped cover it. Yes, no hesitation now. No lies left there at least. She forged the signatures? No. That answer hit immediately. Because I believed him. Then who did? Dylan looked sick suddenly. He did. I stared at him. What? Dad. The room went completely still. No. He forged older authorization dates himself. That makes no sense. It did to him. Dylan rubbed both hands over his face. He thought if the money disappeared legally, nobody could charge me criminally after he died. I could barely process the sentence. Dad protected him. Even then. Even dying. He was trying to save you? Yes. Then why change the will? Silence again. Heavy silence. Dylan looked toward the floor. Because he found out what Mom did afterward. There it was. The real crack. Not gambling, not stole transfers, something after. What did she do? Dylan whispered the answer. She moved your inheritance. Cold spread through my entire body. What inheritance? He looked at me slowly. The second account wasn't debt money, Lena. Every sound around me disappeared. That account had your name on it. I sat down without meaning to. Dad's second account. Mine. How much? Dylan closed his eyes. 280,000. I genuinely stopped breathing for a second. Dad never told me, never hinted, nothing. He sold Grandpa's land before he got sick, Dylan continued quietly. He hid the money because Mom kept pulling from the other accounts trying to help me. I remembered Grandpa's farmland near Muskogee, selling suddenly 2 years earlier. Dad said retirement planning. Lie, or partial lie. He wanted your tuition covered forever, Dylan whispered. Master's degree too. Tears finally burned my eyes then, not because of the money. Because Dad planned for my future while dying, and I never knew. What did Mom do? Dylan swallowed hard. She moved the account after hospice started. Into what? She made it joint. With whose silence? Then me. I stood up immediately. The movement scared him. She said it was temporary. He rushed out. She said creditors could freeze assets after Dad died. Did you believe her? Yes. Lie. Or maybe not fully. Desperate people believe useful things. I paced toward the window, trying to breathe normally. So the college fund drama was fake? No, Dylan said quickly. That money was still real. But it was smaller than the second account. Everything rearranged itself inside my head. The forged signatures, the fear, the safe deposit box. Marcus. Dad changing the will. Not because of the original college fund. Because Mom touched the hidden inheritance after Dad lost the ability to stop her. Then Dylan quietly said the sentence that destroyed whatever remained of my trust. She moved the second account 3 days before Dad died. I turned slowly. Dad was unconscious by then. He could not consent, could not fight, could not even speak. What happened when he found out? Dylan stared at the carpet. He woke up. A chill ran through me instantly. What? He heard Mom talking in the hospital room. Dylan's voice cracked slightly. He wasn't fully unconscious yet. I remembered that week. Machines beeping, morphine, doctors whispering outside curtains. Mom sent me home twice because nothing was changing. What did he hear? She told Aunt Cheryl the transfer was done. My stomach turned. And Dad understood? Dylan nodded. He asked for Marcus the next morning, Marcus. Of course. He changed the will that same day. What did it say? Dylan looked at me carefully now. Like he knew this was the final line crossing. It removed Mom completely. Silence. Pure silence. Even the rain outside felt distant suddenly. Dad cut Mom out entirely. After 27 years of marriage, I sat back down slowly. Why didn't she tell me? 'Cause the safe deposit box has the original will. There it was. The object, the center of everything. What else is in the box? Dylan's expression tightened. A letter. What letter? One Dad wrote after the hospital. I stared at him. You read it? No lie, this time definite lie. Because his eyes watered instantly afterward. What did it say? He shook his head slowly. You need to hear it yourself. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He froze, staring at the screen. Did not answer. Buzz again. Then a text appeared. I saw enough before he turned the phone away. You have until tomorrow. Fear crossed his face instantly. Real fear. Not guilt anymore. Something worse. What's happening? I asked quietly. Dylan looked at me for a long moment. Then finally said the truth I had not expected. Mom borrowed against the second account too. Borrowed. Against my inheritance. How much? His answer came almost too softly to hear. All of it. And what happened next is not what I expected. And it is not what they expected either. Monday morning arrived cold and clear for the first time in weeks. No rain. Just sharp wind moving trash along the sidewalks outside First National Bank. I parked across the street at 8:41 a.m. and sat gripping Dad's safe deposit key inside my coat pocket. The original will rested in a manila folder beside me now. I had opened the box Saturday night after leaving the cemetery. Marcus stayed after closing to let me inside. He never said much. He did not need to. The truth spoke well enough on its own. Dad's original will, transfer records, handwritten timelines, and one sealed letter addressed directly to me. I still could not fully process the last page. If Eleanor attempts transfer or concealment of Lena's inheritance after my medical incapacitation, all marital claims are revoked immediately. Dad knew, not suspected. Knew. The letter explained everything else. Mom borrowed against my inheritance to pay Dylan's gambling debt after private lenders threatened criminal charges. She believed she could quietly replace the money later through refinancing and insurance payouts. Then the insurance payout collapsed. Everything spiraled after that, and Dad found out before dying. That was the real betrayal, not favoritism. Panic, greed mixed with fear. People destroy families fastest when trying to save them. At 8:57, I stepped out of the car. The folder felt heavier than paper should feel. Inside the bank lobby, Marcus already waited near his office looking pale. A younger teller with red hair kept glancing nervously toward the entrance every few seconds. Something was wrong. Then the front doors burst open behind me. Mom, Dylan, and a young brunette woman holding a baby carrier. I recognized her instantly from Facebook photos. Sophie, Dylan's girlfriend, pregnant again from the look of it. Interesting witness choice. Mom stopped cold seeing the folder in my hands. For 1 second nobody moved, then Marcus spoke quietly. Miss Carter, we can proceed privately. No, Mom interrupted sharply. Heads turned across the lobby immediately. 3 customers near the teller line looked over together. The security guard near the entrance straightened slightly. Public now. Exactly what Mom hated most. I stayed calm, always calm. You told me Dad wanted fairness, I said softly. Mom's eyes darted toward the folder again. Lena, please. New word, not command. Not manipulation. Fear. Dylan looked exhausted beside her. Purple bruising darkened under one eye now. Sophie noticed it too. You said this meeting was about paperwork, she whispered to him. Dylan could not answer. Marcus guided us toward the glass office anyway. Security guard followed halfway before stopping nearby. Witness 1. Marcus closed the office door but left the blinds open. Witnesses still visible. Good. Mom sat first, hands shaking now. Dylan remained standing beside Sophie. The baby inside the carrier started fussing softly. Ordinary sounds during catastrophic moments always feel surreal. Marcus opened the file carefully. Mrs. Carter, he began formally. We need clarification regarding post-incapacitation transfers connected to account ending 4421. Mom's face drained completely. Sophie looked confused. What account? Nobody answered her. Marcus continued. The bank received evidence suggesting unauthorized restructuring activity occurred while Michael Carter lacked legal competency. Mom looked directly at me then, not angry, cornered. You opened the box. Yes. Silence spread across the office. Then Mom whispered something I never expected. I was trying to save him. Him, not herself. Dylan, Sophie slowly turned toward him. What is she talking about? Dylan covered his face with one hand. The baby started crying harder now. Marcus slid the original will across the table carefully. Mom stared at Dad's signature for a long time. Real signature, no hesitation in the pen strokes. Strong, fast, certain, exactly like I remembered. He changed everything, Marcus said quietly. Mom laughed once, small broken laugh. Of course he did. Sophie grabbed the papers suddenly. Dylan? He did not stop her. Good, because everyone deserved the truth now. Her eyes moved quickly across the pages, then stopped, then widened. You used her inheritance? Nobody answered. That silence answered enough. Sophie looked horrified. You told me your mom was helping with business debt. Business again. Still lying to people, even now. It started as gambling, I said calmly. Sophie slowly looked toward Dylan. Gambling? Dylan finally broke then. Actually broke. It was supposed to be temporary, he whispered. Mom stood immediately. Stop talking. Too late. He kept going anyway. They threatened to report the fraud charges from Vegas. Sophie stared at him like she no longer recognized his face. What fraud? Dylan looked at me helplessly. Interesting. Still wanting rescue. The casino markers, he admitted quietly. I used fake income documents. The room went dead silent. Even Marcus looked shocked now. Mom grabbed the edge of the desk hard enough that her knuckles turned white. I fixed it, she snapped suddenly. I protected this family. No, I said quietly. Dad protected it. That hit her harder than yelling would have. Because it was true. She looked at me with tears finally spilling down both cheeks. He was dying. So you stole from me? I borrowed. Interesting word choice. Even now, Marcus spoke carefully. The original trust instructions identify Lena Carter as sole beneficiary, sole. Not shared, not family money. Mine. Sophie stood abruptly, holding the papers away from Dylan like they were contaminated. You lied to me for 2 years. I was trying to fix it. Same sentence again. Always tomorrow. Always almost fixed. The security guard stepped closer outside the office when voices rose. Witness 2. And near the teller line, the red-haired bank teller openly watched now too. Witness 3. Public justice. Exactly as Dad probably intended once he stored the originals. Mom suddenly looked toward me desperately. You still have enough left for school. That sentence stunned even Dylan. Not apology, not remorse. Negotiation. How much? I asked quietly. Silence. How much is left? Mom's lips trembled. 43,000 out of 280,000. My father spent years building my future. They burned almost all of it. Dylan sat down hard beside the wall like his legs stopped working. Sophie slowly backed away from him, holding the baby carrier tightly. Then Marcus placed one final document onto the desk. Loan records against the inheritance account, signed by Mom alone. Dylan stared at the page. What is that? Marcus answered carefully. Additional borrowing activity from 6 weeks ago. Mom closed her eyes immediately. Dylan looked confused, then terrified. You said you stopped. Mom whispered without opening her eyes. I tried. There it was. The final truth. Even after Dad died. Even after the first thefts. Even after the forged signatures. She kept taking more. And for the first time in his life, Dylan realized he had not been the favorite child. He had been the excuse. By Tuesday afternoon, everyone in the family knew. Aunt Cheryl called first. Then Cousin Brent. Then people from church started texting vague messages about praying for healing. Funny how fast secrets travel once money gets attached. Mom stopped answering calls entirely. Dylan disappeared for almost 2 days. Sophie moved into her sister's apartment near Jenks with the baby. And I sat inside my tiny apartment surrounded by folders Dad left behind, trying to understand how one family could collapse so completely in less than a month. The lawyer meetings started Thursday. Probate reopened officially at 9:30 a.m. Mom looked 20 years older walking into the courthouse. No makeup, hands shaking. For the first time in my life, nobody rushed to protect her version first. Not even Dylan. That changed everything. The evidence moved quickly after that. The original will, bank timelines, transfer records, loan documents. Marcus testified calmly for almost 40 minutes. He never looked directly at Mom once. Neither did I. The judge spoke plainly in the end. Post-incapacitation transfers violated fiduciary protections attached to the trust. Most remaining assets would return legally to me. But remaining turned out to be smaller than expected. After penalties, debts, interest payments, and recovery costs, only $61,404 remained recoverable immediately. The rest was gone. Casinos, loans, interest, panic borrowing. Bad decisions layered over older bad decisions. That is how destruction usually works. Not one explosion, 100 smaller collapses. Nobody stops in time. Outside the courthouse, reporters were not waiting or anything dramatic like that. Real life disappoints movies. Just wind, traffic, people smoking near concrete steps. Ordinary Thursday. Mom stopped me near the parking lot. Lena, I turned slowly. She looked fragile suddenly. Actually fragile. I never hated you. Interesting sentence. Because hatred was never the real issue. I know, I answered quietly. And I did know. That was the tragedy. She loved me, just not enough to stop herself. Tears filled her eyes immediately. I thought I could repair it before you noticed. There it was again. The sentence underneath every disaster. Before you noticed, not before it happened. She stepped closer carefully. Your father stopped speaking to me that last week because of the account. I swallowed hard. Dad never told me, never burdened me with it. He said protecting Dylan was destroying everyone else. Wind moved loose strands of hair across her face. I thought he was wrong. Was. Past tense finally. Then she handed me something folded from her coat pocket. Dad's bracelet watch. The silver one he wore every Sunday morning. He wanted you to have this. My throat tightened instantly. I took it carefully. Still scratched near the clasp from when he dropped it fixing the garage stairs years ago. Tiny details survive longer than people. Mom looked like she wanted to say more. Instead, she nodded once and walked away toward her car alone. No dramatic ending, no screaming, just consequences. Dylan called me that night around 11:40. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. Silence first, then breathing, finally. She left the house. I sat up slowly. What? She's staying with Aunt Cheryl. His voice sounded hollow now, empty. The bank's taking the house in 60 days. I closed my eyes briefly. Dad worked 23 years paying for that house. Gone too. I'm sorry, he whispered suddenly. Real apology this time. Not strategy, not panic, just grief. I leaned back against the wall quietly. You knew she kept borrowing. Yes, why didn't you stop her? Long silence, then the truth. Because if she stopped helping me, I had nothing. There it was, the center of everything. Fear not evil, fear of failure, fear of disappointment. Fear of becoming ordinary after spending your whole life protected from consequences. I love Dad, he whispered. I know. He still tried saving me after everything. That part hurt worst of all. Dad knew Dylan stole, knew Mom moved the inheritance, and still tried protecting both of them until the end. Love can become destructive when it loses boundaries. We talked another 20 minutes that night, mostly silence between sentences. At the very end, Dylan quietly asked, "What are you going to do now?" I looked around my apartment. Cheap furniture, late rent notice, Dad's watch resting beside the recovered trust documents. Then I thought about the original college plan Dad built before everything went wrong. I'm going back to school, I said. Dylan started crying softly after that. Not loud, just exhausted crying from someone who finally ran out of lies. 3 months later, I used part of the recovered money to pay off Sophie's overdue rent anonymously. She never learned it came from me. Dylan entered outpatient addiction treatment in November. Mom sold most of her jewelry before the foreclosure finalized. And me? I started classes again at Tulsa Community College that winter. First day back, I wore Dad's watch. During orientation, a girl beside me complained about financial aid paperwork taking forever. Everybody laughed softly. Normal life again, or something close to it. Sometimes I still think about that first morning inside the bank. The bracelet clicking against marble, the fake's signature. The way Mom smiled while everything underneath our family quietly cracked apart. People imagine betrayal as loud usually, but the worst kind happens calmly, across kitchen tables, inside hospitals, under words like temporary and protection and family. And what stayed with me longest was not the money they stole. It was realizing how many chances they had to stop before losing everything anyway.